The proceeding will start shortly. 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 The proceeding will start The proceeding will start shortly. 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 The proceeding will start shortly.
Order, order. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just before we start, if anybody's in any doubt, the person with 4 legs in the gallery is a registered pat dog, and she's there with the chairman's consent. Christina Rees to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir Roger, and it's always a pleasure to serve under you as chair. The Petitions Committee has asked me to open this debate. I beg to move that this House has considered E-petition 554073. The petition closed on the 30th of April 2021 with 104,885 signatures and asks that the UK Government introduces legislation to abolish greyhound racing by a managed shutdown of activities and ensure the welfare of redundant dogs through a levy on the industry. The petitioner wishes to remain anonymous, so the words that I speak this evening are her words. The petitioner asserts that the welfare of greyhounds is not adequately protected by the Welfare Act 2006, the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, known as GBGB, nor any independent body, and greyhounds endure unavoidable suffering on dangerously configured tracks, are raced in extreme weather conditions, and housed in kennels not independently inspected. An early day motion was tabled on the 16th of December 2021, acknowledging and supporting the petition. The UK Government responded to the petition on the 26th of November 2020. The petitioner told me that greyhound racing uses thousands of greyhounds as a global online and betting shop commodity, and that spectators at greyhound racing tracks are not needed because racing is live streamed. Pressure from animal welfare charities and campaigners resulted in GBGB being required to publish annual data of greyhounds injured, rehomed and euthanized for humane or economic reasons. However, the Dogs Trust and the RSPCA have questioned the accuracy of this data because different data sets have been used for different years, making direct annual comparisons difficult. And the data is not broken down to track level, preventing remedial action, if required, at a particular track. The total recorded number of GBGB greyhounds injured annually since 2017 is, in 2017, 4,837, 2018, 4,963, 2019, 4,970, 2020, 3,507, and those put to sleep on humane or economic grounds in 2017, 605, 2018, 566, 2019, 472, and in 2020, 224. The petitioner found that greyhounds recorded as being in rescue centres or being rehomed as a pet were actually still racing. And the dual system of GBGB registered and independent tracks does not work because greyhounds are raced at both tracks. GBGB data records some greyhounds as retired, but the petitioner says that some of these are sold or given away to race on the 3 independent tracks. The petitioner spoke to me about insufficient enforcement of the Welfare of Racing Greyhounds Regulations 2010 by local authority trading standards departments due to lack of welfare inspections at tracks because many councils are under-resourced, and that schooling tracks and breeding facilities fall outside these regulations. The petitioner believes that the Greyhound Commitment GBGB reform programme does not go far enough. As shown by GBGB injuries statistics as a percentage of racing dogs, which show a minor fluctuation, not a sustained improvement. So in 2017, it was 1.19%, 2018, 1.16%, 2019, 1.21%, 2020, 1.12%. The petitioner referred me to Section 3.1 of Dr. Andrew Knight's Injuries in Racing Greyhounds 2018 report, of which I'm sure members are familiar. The salient points are that races are run anti-clockwise, so most injuries occur on the left foreleg and the right hind leg, because when negotiating a bend in the track, the left foreleg is used as a pivot with claws digging into the ground, whilst the right hind leg moves in an arc, providing the primary propulsive force. The greyhound skeleton adapts by reabsorbing calcium from other bodily areas, resulting in spongy or honeycombed bone composition, which contributes to track injuries. On the suggestion of the petitioner, I visited Hope Rescue. It's a centre run by Vanessa Wadden, so that I could listen to the practical realities of rehoming injured and surplus greyhounds. Hope Rescue is in my honourable friend's, the member for Ogmore's constituency, and he wanted to be here this evening, but he has parliamentary duties elsewhere. Vanessa is in the public gallery this evening, We also have Susie the greyhound with us, already mentioned by the chair, who is representing greyhounds as pets and pets as therapy. I hope I've got that right, Sir Roger. Hope Rescue is named in the honour of Last Hope, a greyhound found abandoned on a Caerphilly mountain in 2004. Having been shot with a captive bolt gun, both his ears had been hacked off to hide identifying ear tattoos. Last Hope was still alive, and his finder reported that he was still wagging his tail, but he had to be put to sleep. This cruel story inspired Vanessa to become involved in greyhound rescue, and she set up Hope Rescue, which is an all-breed rescue centre. Move forward 17 years, and Hope Rescue is supporting the UK campaign and the campaign in Wales to ban greyhound racing because of welfare concerns and the prospect of increased greyhound racing when Wales's only independent track, Valleys Track, becomes a GBGB track. Hope Rescue started its Amazing Greys project at Valleys Track in April 2018 to provide emergency rescue spaces and vet care for injured and surplus greyhounds before being transferred to one of Hope's partners, the Dogs Trust, Greyhound Rescue Wales and Forever Hounds Trust, although some dogs were rehomed directly from Hope Rescue. Between April 2018 and August 2021, the project took in over 200 greyhounds, surrendered because their owners or trainers had links with Valleys Track. This included over 40 greyhounds who had sustained a serious injury racing up Valleys Track, mostly fractures. Sadly, 5 greyhounds didn't survive their injuries. Many greyhounds had old, undiagnosed injuries, lameness, plus other health problems such as dental, skin, fleas, worms, and behavioural problems such as anxiety and fear. After publicly sharing the petition we are debating this evening, Vanessa was told that Hope Rescue was no longer welcome at the Valleys Track, and so the fate of current surplus and injured greyhounds from Valleys Track is sadly unknown. Although Valleys Track is an independent track, Vanessa told me that her project revealed the strong links between the regulated GBGB sector and independent tracks. 67% of injured greyhounds at Valleys Track were GBGB greyhounds. Vanessa and the volunteers taking part in the project were heartbroken to witness these greyhounds in so much shock and pain when they had emergency treatment at Hope Rescue's vets. There were no vets at Valleys Track. The majority of the injuries were broken legs, including snapped bones going straight through the skin. One dog had the skin degloved from her leg down to the bone when she collided with the hare, and another fractured her skull, face and ribs during a collision. Sadly, she didn't survive. Valleys Track advertised their eye-watering, sharp first bend on their website, and Vanessa witnessed most injuries occurring at the first bend. But the greyhounds tried to continue to the end of the race because that's what they're trained to do. Vanessa believes it is not acceptable that the risk of these beautiful dogs suffering an injury or even dying is disregarded by the industry as collateral damage. As she can testify, behind every injury and death statistic is a beautiful, sentient dog that would have endured immense suffering. Vanessa told me that animal welfare charities are currently experiencing unprecedented demand and pressures due to the huge surge in pet ownership during the pandemic. On the day I visited Hope Rescue, she had 216 dogs in its care, including some seized from illegal breeders, stray dogs and dogs surrendered by their owners. Rehoming surplus greyhounds is an additional pressure on rescue centres in terms of both cost and capacity, which is created by the welfare deficiencies in the greyhound racing industry. The dilemma facing rescue centres is that they do not want to stop taking racing greyhounds, even though it would free up thousands of additional rescue spaces and improve animal welfare in the wider dog population and their owners. Because, Sir Roger, who would look after the greyhounds? Vanessa recognises that GBGB has introduced some recent financial schemes, including the Injury Recovery Scheme, which provides a 50% grant for certain injuries up to £2,000 and a £400 retirement bond. But these financial incentives only cover a proportion of the true costs and resources needed to rehome surplus and injured greyhounds as a companion pet. Vanessa believes that the need for an injury recovery scheme speaks volumes about the welfare issues caused by racing greyhounds. Resources should not be needed to fix broken legs, because legs should not be broken in the first place. Hope Rescue launched a petition to ban greyhound racing in Wales in September 2021. And within a week, it secured the 10,000 signature threshold to be considered for a debate. The petition had cross-party support in the Senedd from Jane Dodds, leader of the Welsh Lib Dems, Luke Fletcher, Plaid Cymru, Caroline Thomas, Labour, plus rescue centres across the UK. The petition closed on the 1st of March 2022 with 35,101 signatures and was discussed by the Petitions Committee on the 7th of March, where it was agreed to proceed with a call for evidence, followed by a debate in the Senedd. In conclusion, Sir Roger, the petitioner stresses that public attitudes to greyhound racing are changing. In the UK, there were once 77 GBGB licensed tracks and 200 independent tracks. Today, there are 20 licensed tracks and 3 unlicensed tracks remaining. Greyhound racing, to satisfy the needs and create profits for the betting industry, is being recognised as an animal welfare and a gambling addiction problem. 99% of British greyhound bets are placed online and at betting offices, so it's unlikely that this remains in the local economy. Increased regulation may offer a temporary solution and may marginally increase the welfare of greyhounds whilst they are racing. But the significant number of injuries, deaths and surplus greyhounds needing rescue spaces requires a long-term strategy. A sustainable solution to the welfare problems is needed, and the petitioner and Vanessa strongly feel that a ban is the only solution. A ban can be achieved immediately in Scotland and Wales due to the low number of tracks, but in England a ban should be phased in to ensure that displaced greyhounds could be accommodated and the infrastructure dismantled over time. Hope Rescue recently commissioned a YouGov poll which showed that 45% of the public support a ban, 17% oppose and 38% are unsure or don't support either. The foundation of any welfare strategy is prevention is better than cure. The petitioner and Vanessa humbly request a meeting with the Minister to discuss how the UK government could progress their proposal to abolish greyhound racing. Thank you, Sir Roger.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 554073 relating to greyhound racing. Andrew Rossendale.
Thank you, Sir Roger. Good afternoon, colleagues. And I'd like to commend the Honourable Lady for rising to this challenge and in leading this very important and indeed sensitive debate today about the future of greyhound racing in this country. I listened to everything she said and sympathise with so much of the points she's making, because I think all of us in this room are animal lovers and we care for the welfare of the greyhounds and the animals that we have a duty of care towards. And so there is much common ground in what we are discussing today. However, there are differences of opinion about how we approach this and how we get the best for greyhounds and for those associated with the greyhound industry in this country. And so, Sir Roger, I am pleased today to be able to contribute to this debate, and I do so as co-chairman of the all-party parliamentary group for greyhounds, and I'm proud to do so alongside my honourable friend. And I'm also a vice president of the Greyhound Trust, which works tirelessly for the welfare of greyhounds and rehoming of greyhounds across the country once their racing days are over. And of course, I am the MP for Romford, which is the home of Essex and London's premier Greyhound Stadium, which has been there for many, many years. And therefore, I fully support all those who are today calling for the highest possible standards of welfare in the sport of greyhound racing. None of us want to see animals being injured and harmed. We all want to see the best possible care and attention for those dogs in this country, and rightly so that we should all be fighting for that. But I also support the continuation of greyhound racing as a traditional sport in this country, provided, Sir Roger, that we strive to continue to improve the welfare standards for the greyhounds themselves. Indeed, I want to restate my unequivocal support for animal health and welfare in greyhound racing. I've always been passionate about this, and as I am for all issues relating to animal welfare, as the Minister knows only too well. Indeed, Sir Roger, this is not a matter I take lightly at all. Someone has always fought for animal welfare, as I have done in the throughout the United Kingdom since my election as a Member of Parliament. I'll continue to do so, and I'm open-minded. Where there are things that are wrong, they need to be called out, but we need to do this in an evolutionary way. There is no denying that the welfare standards in greyhound racing have not always been at the level we would all want to see. But I believe that the answer must be to ensure that the great progress made in greyhound welfare, certainly in the last 20 years since I've been involved as an MP, that is built upon rather than to ban the sport altogether. 15 years ago, I was appointed by the then Leader of the Opposition to be the Shadow Home Affairs Minister with responsible for animal welfare. So I particularly worked on this issue at that time. And I worked with numerous animal welfare organisations, both at a national and an international level, to secure the health and welfare of all the animals, especially dogs and greyhounds. Since then, I've continued my work as an animal welfare champion here in Parliament, through my role as chairman of the all-party group for zoos and aquariums and of greyhounds, and through my private member's bill, the Animal Penalty Notices Bill, which aims to introduce penalties for individuals who have cruelly mistreated pets, zoo animals and livestock, and greyhounds as well, absolutely. So, as you will see, Sir Roger, and as you all know, I approach this issue with a genuine desire to improve the lives of the greyhounds and to ensure their welfare is properly secured. Our society is rightly judged by how it treats its animals and its care, and the care that goes for and that care must go for racing dogs too. Hence, I've worked to support the Greyhound Trust, the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, Dogs Trust, and all other organisations that work tirelessly for the welfare of the animals. Sir Roger, despite the concerns many members of the public have expressed, and who many members of this House share, I nevertheless feel confident to stand here today and give my support for the continuation of greyhound racing, something which I believe, when appropriately regulated, properly regulated and managed, can ensure the health and welfare of the greyhounds. Certainly.
Thank you, Sir Roger. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. He is indeed an animal welfare champion in this House and has been for a long time, and I hope I share his passion for that. Isn't it correct, though, that a lot of the statistics with regards to the welfare of greyhounds in terms of number of injuries or in terms of number of greyhounds successfully housed after retirement are all going in the right direction? Is that not the case? There's still work to be done, but aren't we moving in the right direction?
The honourable member for Tewkesbury is completely right, and I wouldn't be standing here today if I didn't think this was going in the right direction. There's a huge amount of work to do, absolutely, and I believe we should be championing that work and making sure that it continues to go in the right direction, because if it doesn't, then we'd all be deeply upset about that, and we would probably not be defending it today. But because it is going in the right direction, and because GBGB, I believe, are now taking this seriously, still an enormous amount of work to do, we need this to be an evolution rather than to just bring in arbitrary bans. Arbitrary bans often don't work. They have the opposite effect, and this has happened in other parts of the world. So I share the honourable gentleman's sentiments, but let me be clear that my absolute priority is the welfare of the dogs, and I will continue to argue for that here in this House. So, greyhound racing is, Sir Roger, you probably already know this, but one of the most popular spectator sports in the United Kingdom. I know that from coming from Romford and the huge amount of people, local people from all around East London and Essex that come to Romford Greyhound Stadium. They love the greyhounds. They don't just come to watch them race. They actually really do adore the greyhounds and raise a lot of money for the welfare of the greyhounds at Romford Stadium. And there are 20 licensed stadiums in the UK which generate multi-million pound revenues and employ 7,000 people. So it also employs local people as well. I also want to highlight in this year of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee that greyhound racing is actually an historic British tradition. The greyhound is the first breed of dog mentioned in literature. Greyhound racing reached its height of popularity after World War I, where it provided an affordable day out for British working people. Let's be honest about that. It was a pastime for working people. It still is, certainly in my constituency. I am proud that the people of Romford continue this age-old tradition, but they balance that with the love of the dogs and the animal welfare. I see this all the time. They don't have disregard, and they would hate the idea of an animal being ill-treated, and they work very hard. They would not go and watch the greyhound racing, actually, Sir Roger, if they thought there was arbitrary cruelty going on. And so, as I've said before, this needs to be an evolution to a better place. So I'm proud of my constituents who do regularly go to see the greyhounds racing at the London Road Stadium in Romford. It is important that we do not take this institution away from my constituents and those across the country who go regularly to watch the greyhounds and participate in that sport, and also raise money to support the welfare of greyhounds in this country. They take great pride in breeding, racing and caring for their dogs. Greyhounds are active dogs that are bred for high-impact exercise. They enjoy having a purpose on the race courses and the attention they receive in the stadium. I see that. They love the attention. They really do. They enjoy what they do. Vets have stated that greyhounds need regular high-impact exercise to maintain a healthy and active lifestyle, which they derive on the tracks and during training and the kennels. And the kennels, I accept the Honourable Lady has a point. We need more inspections and more veterinary attention in the kennels as well. Let's go there too. Let's not ignore what goes on in the kennels. Not just the tracks, the kennels also need the same level of scrutiny. However, I say this as co-chairman of the all-party group for greyhounds. I believe it is important that we understand that greyhound welfare must also be at the heart of the sport, and that we must do everything we can to safeguard the well-being of the dogs. Greyhound racing in the UK is regulated by the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, which states that greyhound safety and welfare is at the heart of everything they do. This means that races have to be strictly regulated to protect animal welfare. Greyhounds must be rehomed after retirement, and funding from racing used directly to contribute to greyhound welfare, but a lot more, particularly from the bookmakers, needs to be done to contribute to the rehoming of the greyhounds after their racing days are over. And I believe that we need to pressure them even more strongly to make a greater contribution to the welfare of the greyhounds in retirement. The GBGB has made a series of commitments to the project of greyhound welfare, a zero tolerance policy against any individual found to have mistreated a greyhound in any way, including licence suspensions, fines and lifetime bans from the sport, ensuring a vet is present at every race and that every greyhound is inspected before and after racing to make sure that no greyhound will race if the vet has concerns, maximising track safety to ensure that the UK's track injury rate is the lowest in the world, and requiring the highest standards of welfare at trainers' kennels. And finally, ensuring that racing greyhounds enjoy long and healthy retirements. And since September 2020, GBGB has paid more than £2 million out to help home over 5,000 greyhounds, on top of the work of all the other organisations and the small local groups. We have the Romford Retired Greyhounds organisation. I know the work they do, and I know lots of different groups across the country work tirelessly to ensure that the dogs are rehomed, loved and cared for in their latter years. I've also heard great stories about how GBGB has been working with Battersea Dogs Home to ensure the rehoming of the greyhounds, and I hope that continues, and with other dog welfare organisations as well. It is through these measures that the Greyhound Board of Great Britain has lowered the fatality and injury rate of greyhounds more than ever and successfully rehomed more greyhounds than we've ever seen before. So we are, Sir Roger, going in the right direction. We've got to keep that going ever stronger, and I know there'll be cross-party support for increasing that welfare across the country, because we all love animals and we want the best for them. Animal welfare is and always will be my primary concern in this debate. The Greyhound Board of Great Britain has been able, I believe, to deliver an excellent programme of animal welfare and will continue to strive for even stronger measures to secure the welfare of the dogs in future. They have done this through their regulation of races, through their commitment to provide funding for veterinary treatment for greyhounds, and by offering a home to the retired dogs. Greyhound racing is an important British tradition that, when conducted properly, is fully compatible with animal welfare considerations, but we must go further. A ban would result in thousands of jobs being sacrificed, millions of pounds lost to Her Majesty's Treasury, areas of deprivation losing yet another community asset, and thousands of fit, healthy and much loved greyhound racing dogs being left with no direct means of being supported. That's not the answer at this stage. We have to work together to ensure the improvements are increased and that the welfare of the animals is given the utmost priority without going for a sudden ban, which I think would lead to unintended consequences for the welfare of the dogs. And so, Sir Roger, it is for these reasons, and with the proviso that the welfare standards must continue to be improved, that I believe we must also allow the continuation of the sport within the United Kingdom, and I look forward to the Minister's response to all of the important points that members have made in this debate today, because I know the government is dedicated also to animal welfare and to the highest possible standards in greyhound racing. I look forward to her remarks at the end of this debate. Thank you very much.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Sir Roger. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And like my honourable friend from Romford, I think I fully support most of the comments which you said with regards to the continuation of the greyhound race. And I think I want to, first of all, just simply say this debate is very welcome and in no way should be confrontational. I think the priority of everyone regardless of their views, should be the health of and the welfare of greyhounds. You know, greyhounds are the most lovable, intelligent animals you'll ever come across. And to listen to some of the tales that my honourable friend mentioned in the discussions earlier are quite harrowing. You know what, we hear tales of when greyhounds have received some of the most terrible sort of treatment. And let's not be, you know, it happens, by the way, Sir Roger, and I'm not saying that it doesn't. But there are bad apples everywhere. And what we need to do is we need to ensure that the welfare standards and the investment in welfare into these wonderful animals is increased. I think a massive thanks, you know, has got to go to the GBG, the BGRF, and thanks to the people who have sent me information, knowing that this debate was on this afternoon, the RSPCA, the Dogs Trust, individuals who might have a different view to me, but I'm happy to listen to everything that everybody says with regards to the welfare of these wonderful animals, because it's important. I've been involved in greyhound racing for 40 years, personally. I've always had greyhounds. I've never met one person, do you know that? I've never met one person anywhere that wants to see any harm to these wonderful dogs. Not one. And we talk about, you know, rules and regulations about banning people who get, listen, if anybody in my area got found out of court doing anything against this wonderful breed of animals, they would be banished from the community. Let me tell you. And it has happened. So I think the priority from this discussion today, from this petition, is that the common denominator from us all is that we support the increased investment in welfare. I mentioned, Sir Roger, my interest in greyhound racing, or the sport. People call it an industry. People call it a sport. Reaches back to my days in the mining industry, where we had whippets and we had greyhounds. And quite often the whippets and the greyhounds were looked after better than some of the family. And that's the reality of it. And the communities looked after these wonderful animals. And my experiences after that, I'm involved with greyhounds at different tracks up and down the country, in Ireland, in Wales, in Scotland, and it was one of the, it was the most enjoyable sport, I was involved with for quite some time. I went to different tracks with greyhounds. They were all looked after better than my own kids. Now, the notion that these dogs are like abused and killed and battered to bits on a regular basis, I think is very much outdated. I think it really is. And when you look at the statistics, as my honourable friend pointed out before, when you look at the statistics, they're heading in the right direction. That's not to say, it's not to say that we should rest on our laurels, because we've got to continue with the investment, as I've mentioned a number of times now, into greyhound welfare. I've been to many trainers' kennels, like 10, 20, 30, 40 trainers' kennels. I haven't been to a bad kennel yet. That might be my good luck. The kennels I've been to, You could eat your own food off the floor. The food that they've got, you could eat it yourself. You know, the likes of the legendary Harry Williams, a British breeder and a greyhound trainer. I've spent hours, if not days, if not weeks, at Harry's wonderful kennels. And Harry, who was just retired, probably for the third or fourth time, you know, when he retired, he had more retired greyhounds in his kennels than he had racing dogs, because of the very fact that they loved the dogs so much. And then you look at the issue, and that was a massive issue with regard to dogs travelling from the kennels to the track and the transportation. And you know, these sort of things we need to look at. We need to continue to keep the pressure on to make sure that things are as best, if not better, than anywhere else in the world. The tracks themselves, a lot of them used to be, I might add, used to be in a state of disrepair. What we've seen, in fact, is that the majority of tracks have closed. We've only got 20 GB tracks, that's licensed tracks, Sir Roger, in operation now. And I think there are 3 independents, which is non-licensed, which isn't governed by the GB. And the tracks themselves have improved dramatically through investment in welfare for the dogs at the tracks. No, I've got a bit of an issue with regards to individuals or groups saying about the injuries. Greyhounds want to run. They were bred to run, and they're not bred to run in straight lines, I might add. They're not bred to run in straight lines. You will get injuries with greyhounds. You get injuries with hounds. You get injuries with any type of dog who loves to run, and particularly at a high speed. But I agree with everything that's been said, that we've got to minimise and try, well, damnness, to eradicate injuries at greyhound tracks. And if that means, you know, the investment in the tracks themselves, then so be it. We've got to try and do everything we possibly can for these wonderful animals. You know, we look at the statistics, and it is worth reminding ourselves. And I don't want this debate, basically, Sir Roger, to be the facts and the figures of facts. And this debate should be about how we can further improve and continue to improve the welfare of dog racing, of greyhound racing. There's a whole number of facts and figures which, probably looking at the time, they've already been mentioned by my honourable friend, and I think it's worth just seeing the summary injury data since the launch of the commitment from the GBGB. The total number of injuries sustained at GBGB tracks, 2018 it was 4963, it's now 3575. The injury rate, that's against total dogs run, in 2018 1.16, it's now 1.12. Total number of fatalities at the GBGB tracks, 2018 was 242, now it's 200. It's heading in the right direction. We're getting the better and better and better at what we do. We cannot rest on our laurels, and we need to continue to get better and better and better. A great statistic is the summary of the retired data since the launch of the GBGB commitment, and that is since in 2018 there was the total number of greyhounds successfully homed or retained within the sport upon retirement. In 2018, 6,773. That was 88% of the greyhounds. And in 2020, it's 7,089, which represents 95% of total greyhounds leaving the sport. And I think that's an amazing result. It's fantastic progress when we now have, as I say, I've been involved for an awful long time, 95% of the dogs being rehomed. What a brilliant achievement. And you know, a lot of it is because of the hard-working people like Vanessa and other people up and down this country, because there's a retired greyhound facility in many places up and down, with volunteers, by the way, with volunteers who do fantastic work and look after the animals, rehome them, because some of them are very tricky to rehome. You know, you just can't even get a greyhound and pick it up, and people need to understand the actual different characters within the greyhounds themselves. And I just think it's worth noting as well, you know, Sir Roger, it really is worth noting that the trainers, they're not millionaires. They're not in it to make fortunes, because if they are, they'll not succeed. You've got hundreds, if not thousands, of kennel hands, young men and young women, looking after these animals as if they're their own kids, basically, working all hours. You can care to imagine looking after the health, the safety and the welfare of greyhounds. Often it costs to themselves, because, let's be honest, a lot of these young people haven't really got a great career path, but dedicate themselves or committed to the greyhounds they look after. So it's not a case where greyhound racing is something where you can get involved with and become, you know, a millionaire. It's quite the opposite. Your finances normally take a dive rather than the other way. So I think it's important that we recognise, and it's important that we listen to everybody's views. It's interesting that when you read the statistics, Sir Roger, depending on who writes the statistics, sometimes they vary quite a lot. And you've got to look into the background. You've got to dig into the statistics to get a real good idea of what is happening. But the GBGB are developing a new long-term strategy for greyhound welfare. It's looking at 5 important points: welfare, nutrition, behaviour, health and mental state, which again has already been discussed. These are fantastic initiatives, and let's hope that they prove, once it's concluded, that they prove to be really beneficial to everyone in the great sport of greyhound racing. It's classically named A Good Life for Every Greyhound. But in conclusion, Sir Roger, I don't want to fight with anybody with regard to this issue. I think what we need, and I fully support people in my community, people across this country, in continuing greyhound racing. I agree with every single person who is looking and got views and ideas on increasing the welfare of greyhounds. The GBGB and the other organisations cannot really rest on their laurels. And just to say that individuals who might suggest and they regularly say that greyhounds should be afforded the same sort of protections as other breeds, when you look at the regulations, when you look at the support we've got in here, whether we agree with the continuation of greyhounds or not, the support for extra protections for this breed is absolutely amazing. I just genuinely think that it's important we continue fighting for better welfare for every single one of those wonderful dogs. So, Roger, I've had some fast dogs and I've had some very slow ones. But let me tell you, they're all beautiful, every single one of them. I've cherished every single one of them. I've loved every single one of them for what they are, not how fast they run.
Chairman of the Select Committee, Neil Parish.
Thank you very much, Sir Roger. And I think it's not only a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, I think it's very apt that you are chairing this afternoon, because you have a huge record on animal welfare. I know you take it extremely seriously, and so it's good to serve under your chairmanship. Can I thank the Honourable Lady for Neath for very much presenting the petition, presenting the facts, and I think it is turning out to be, I think, a very good debate, and one that with very thoughtful debate. I would also say to the Honourable Gentleman from Romford that he's also put a great deal of effort into all animal welfare aspects, but particularly greyhound racing, and it was great to hear what he had to say, and also the great passion that the gentleman from Wandsbeck he had for the racing, and obviously had a number of greyhounds himself, and they are a beautiful dog. And I think, we have to remember today that there is, 104,000 people who have signed this petition, and I think we have to sort of take this very seriously. And I want in a minute really to talk about a little bit about when we had an inquiry on the EFRA committee back in 2016 and what we found. And I think there's no doubt that the background of the welfare of racing greyhounds in England is covered by the Animal Welfare Act of 2006 and the Welfare of Greyhounds Regulation 2010. The 2006 Act allows action to be taken where there is cruelty to an animal or failure to provide for animal welfare needs. These provisions apply where greyhounds are at tracks or kept at trainers' kennels. Moreover, animal welfare standards at all English greyhound tracks are set by the 2010 regulation. These regulations require that all greyhound tracks have a vet present while dogs are running, and that vets inspect all greyhounds to ensure that they are fit to run, including in extreme weather. Temperature-controlled kennelling must also be provided at the track, and also greyhounds must be microchipped and tattooed. A government review said that the regulation had proved effective in improving the welfare of greyhounds at the track and traceability. However, the review also found that much more was needed to be done, and that's what I would, and when I get to our findings from the previous inquiry, I will, ask the Minister for various things that I think which need to be improved. So there is a need to improve conditions, not only at the track for kennelling, but also with trainers. I also think that there's, if you like, the professional trainer and the professional that keeps greyhounds, and they have a number of them, and they really want to be sort of clearly looked at very carefully and make sure that the welfare of those greyhounds is particularly good. You then actually get greyhounds that are kept by people who they're basically they're pets, but they race, and they actually look after them extremely well. But I think, again, we need to check, because as the my honourable gentleman said, you've got to make sure that whatever rules and regulations are in place, that those that will not comply and do not comply, we come down on very heavily. There is an improvement in transparency. In response, GB agreed to publish annual statistics on injuries, retirements and dog euthanasias. And that is a big issue, because it's a case at these tracks where is it that the dog cannot be kept alive, cannot have its injuries put right, or is that dog uneconomic? And that is where I'll come in later to talk about where I believe that the gambling industry must pay much more towards not only the rehoming of these dogs, but also making sure that if the injuries that this dog has sustained can be put right. I mean, there is no doubt that the statistics are going in the right direction. If you look at the deaths in total, not just at the tracks, it was in 2018, it was 932, 710 in 2019, 411 in 2020. But, Sir Roger, 411 dogs is still too many. There's no doubt about that. And so we have to really look at how we can improve that situation. The publication of these stats has been accompanied by the introduction of GP's Greyhounds commitments, which set out targets to reduce track injuries. And again, when we looked at the tracks, I think some tracks are very difficult to water. I agree with the honourable gentleman that greyhounds like to race, they like to run. But I think we've got to also make sure that if there are problems with the tracks, the bends or whatever, perhaps some of those can be ironed out. I think, there's nothing, I don't think, that should be off limits. The GBG also introduced an injury recovery scheme which enables the treatment of rehoming of 500 dogs with career-ending injuries who otherwise would have been put to sleep. In September 2020, GBGB has also introduced a greyhound retirement scheme with a 400 bond paid jointly by the owner and the GBGB, which goes towards rehoming costs at the end of a dog's racing life. GBGB have already paid out over 70,000 in bond payments to improve the rehoming centres. So, to support the GBGB efforts to improve welfare, in January 2019, the government announced an increased funding commitment from bookmakers. So, in 1920, the British Greyhound Racing Fund collected a total of 8.87 million from bookmakers, up from 6.95 million for the previous 12 months. The government continues to encourage any remaining bookmakers who are not signed up to the voluntary arrangement to do so. I would say to the government, and I would say to the Minister quite clearly, any of those gambling authorities that will not pay up should be named. And they should be clearly named and shamed, because they cannot earn money from racing greyhounds if the greyhound race does not take place. And so, therefore, their money that they earn from gambling comes entirely from when the money is placed, the bet is placed on greyhounds, comes entirely from that industry. And so, all aspects of the betting industry must pay up, and I think that is something that I really would urge the Minister, and however difficult it may be, and however difficult they may say it may be, they should actually pay much more money. I'd like to see the amount of money raised doubled. I really would, and I think it's not impossible to do so. In horse racing, as you know, there's a statutory levy where the bookmakers pay 10% of profits made up on horse racing bets, a compulsory 10%. A voluntary 0.6 is a huge difference. The horse racing levy raises some 95 million. Naturally, a bigger industry, but like I said, I think we do have to be absolutely certain, I think, this afternoon, that if we are to, and I think many of us want to see a very regulated industry, but one to continue. But if it is to continue, that money must be raised from the gambling sector in order to make sure that greyhounds are properly rehomed and not euthanized when they could be saved and have a good life thereafter. Also, when we did our 2006 report, we looked at the traceability of greyhounds through their lives, and the microchipping of Dog Regulation 2015 made microchipping dogs, including racing greyhounds, a legal requirement. As you know, one of the drawbacks with the microchipping is we still haven't really got a central database. So therefore, once that dog changes hands, you've got to go back to the original owners and you've got to trace that dog back. And I think there is much more we can do there. There's many greyhounds are bred, as we know, in Ireland. And I think, again, traceability is hugely right. Also, if a greyhound is going to race, then it's not just about speed. You actually want that greyhound to be very robust. And you want its limbs to be strong. And all of these things, I think, need to be taken into consideration as we breed dogs for racing. I think that we should also, like I said again, I can't stress enough that making sure that we check the tracks, we check with vets on track. And when we went both to a GBGB track, and we also went to a non-GBG track. And I have to say, in all honesty, Sir Roger, I was expecting to come away from both of those tracks being far more critical than I was, but I wasn't. But that's not to say, like I said, much to be done. And I think you've always got to remember when a select committee turns up to a racetrack, has it been prepared for us in advance? And I think, you have to take that and look at it, look through what we've seen. But I have to say that I think the tracks have improved. I think the veterinary side has improved. I think much of it is going absolutely in the right direction. So my real conclusions would be that, like I said, we very much make sure, Minister, that the betting fraternity, they pay their dues, and they pay, I believe, twice as much as what they're paying at the moment. Let's make sure that those inspections of those tracks and those vets on those tracks are absolutely trained. I believe they are, but they must be, and they must be present at all times, so that when they weigh the greyhounds, when they check the greyhounds over before they actually race, that they know they're in good condition and that they are, they are ready to race. If there's a problem and an injury, let's make sure all those greyhounds that can be saved and can have a good life afterwards, and they do make great pets. And ironically, although they like to run fast, they actually don't need that much exercise. And of course, they're a very good-tempered dog. You know what I mean? We take our Labrador around Battersea Park and very often meet a greyhound or two. And they are always a very gentle animal, and I think they do make very good pets in their future lives. So I think all of us are absolutely clear in this, and from all the welfare organisations, the Dogs Trust, the RSPCA, the Blue Cross, everybody that's working on this, GB, all the little voluntary groups across the country that's been referred to, that rehome. I've got one in my own constituency that rehomes greyhounds. They all look to do a very good job. But I stress again, while it's always laudable to raise money, from individuals to help with rehoming of greyhounds, I still believe there is enough money being made in the greyhound industry from the betting for that to be properly funded. And so, like I said, I think if we can use what this petition has said today to actually look not... like I said, as the government ministers will know, as the chair of the Select Committee, I take a very independent view of life. I do actually come down on the side of the government on this issue because I believe it should not be banned. But do I believe it should be tightened up? Yes. Do I believe that those betting organisations pay their dues? Yes. Do I believe the minister should bring them all in and make sure they do actually cough up the money? Yes. And let's actually make sure that the breeding of greyhounds, the racing of greyhounds, and actually having the right greyhound doing that racing in the future. And as the honourable gentleman who spoke before me made the point, where the rotten apples are, let's root them out, because you cannot have greyhounds ill-treated, and you must not. So I think this petition is timely. I think the government will need to take it very seriously. The industry will need to take it very seriously. And I do actually thank the charities for the work they do. And like I said, let's actually use this as a very positive approach to make sure that the welfare of the greyhound is much improved. Thank you, Sir Roger.
Thank you. Could I remind the front benches that it would be a courtesy to allow Christina Rees a couple of minutes at the end to wind up the debate. For the SNP, John McNally.
Thank you, Sir Roger. And it's always a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Chair, may I take this opportunity to thank my good friend, the member for Neath, for securing this debate today, this afternoon, on the greyhound racing, a petition receiving around 105,000 signatures to ban greyhound racing, and also ensure that the welfare of these redundant dogs via levy on the industry is absolutely adhered to. Can I say how apt it is that a person like the member for Neath, who's absolutely steeped in sport, who understands, appreciates the benefits and the values of sport, brings this sport in front of us for MPs' attention and debate. And I thought her speech was quite enlightening. So MPs around the room have made some excellent points. They've raised concerns about the welfare of these beautiful animals. And Chair, I too sympathise with Petition, and I'd like to thank the 160 people from my own Falkirk constituency who have signed a petition who don't have a dog track in their area. Its merits, its aims, its ambitions. Who wouldn't, when you read about the cruelty inflicted upon the animals in this so-called sport? Why wouldn't you have sympathy for them? So, Chair, let me take you back a wee while here. May I take you back to in time to some 60 years ago, when I was a young boy growing up in Denny. My friends and I would sneak along to the local dog track. All innocent, all exciting it was to watching these magnificent animals run. Then as we grew, we start to learn a wee bit more about how the greyhounds were actually treated, how they were fed a pie before the race to stop them from running so fast. Goodness knows what else they were being fed or injected with. And of course, when their usefulness was done, they were cruelly destroyed. We probably didn't know any better at that time. But so, Chair, what's improved? There's certainly less tracks now. The British Greyhound Racing Fund have awarded, as others have said, over £1 million to improve the racing tracks and the welfare. The retired Greyhound Trust received approximately £1.4 million to home the greyhounds. That all sounds good. And it leaves you wondering, why, if greyhounds are so wonderful pets, why is there such a problem finding them homes? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's down to the sheer number of dogs that are involved in greyhound racing. There's over 30,000 dogs that are surplus to requirements each year. In 2020, as we've mentioned before, the Greyhound Board recorded, as far as my figures are correct, and I think they are, 3,575 injuries. 324 greyhounds were destroyed in 2018. No home could be found for them. 2019, 14 greyhounds a week died, were destroyed because of injuries while racing. Chair, in Scotland, the welfare of greyhounds is covered by devolved legislation under the Animal Welfare Act Scotland 2006. But significantly, there is no statutory legislation of greyhound racing in Scotland. So, Roger, there are only 2 greyhound tracks currently operating in Scotland. Thornton Greyhounds in Kirkcaldy, an unlicensed flapping track, and Shawfield Greyhound Stadium, licensed under the GBGB. In August 2019, the Glasgow track reduced its activity to a single night of racing per week. There was simply not enough dogs, I'm told, to make up 2 nights racing. Similarly at Thornton. Evidently, it would seem racing greyhound numbers are at their lowest in Scotland, at least, and on its last legs. The Greyhound Board, Great Britain, is the body with responsibility for the governance, regulations, management of the sport of licensed greyhound racing in England, Scotland and Wales. But oddly, these regulations on the welfare of the greyhounds does not apply to independent tracks. I find that quite odd, and I wonder if the Minister could confirm if that's true, please. The Scottish Government does not currently have plans to ban greyhound racing, but they are very much aware of the Animal Welfare Commission's interest on this vexatious business. Chair, I'm going to finish with this letter, my summing up I received from Marie, a Falkirk constituent of mine on greyhound racing. And I'm grateful to her for sending me such a thoughtful and knowledgeable insight into why we are debating this concern this evening. Marie wrote to me, she said, I adopted Morag when she was 5.5. Out of all the wonderful, exciting and noisy dogs in the Greyhound Rescue 5 kennels that day, Morag was just lying there looking at me with her huge brown eyes, and my heart went out to her. She had a rotten life. I'll never know whether she was just born terrified or whether her early experiences made her that way. Ironically, her racing name was Honour and Love, but I saw no signs of ever having been honoured or loved. She didn't know anything about the world outside of racetracks. She'd never slept in anything except straw and probably old newspapers. Shut up, locked up in a crate for most of the day and night, Morag bears the scars of her racing career. Not just mentally, but in the form of ugly large black heads on her abdomen, a nasty scar on her face, and the loss of 17 teeth. So many of the breeders and the trainers don't bother to take care of the hound's teeth. Why? They won't have them long enough to have to deal with the resulting decay from the negligence. See, that happened at Doncaster and Nottingham racetracks in this country. Bookmakers, as my good friend here said, have a lot of money to put into the sport. They've taken a lot out of it. In the world of gambling, these wonderful, intelligent and innocent sight hounds don't matter. Only their ability to run for their lives at the snapping open of a metal trap matters. But Morag matters. When Morag first wagged her tail, and when she first played with her toys, when she sighed contentedly in her basket, Morag had won the best race of all. She survived to have a better life. Her sweet revenge on those who mishandled her, who filled her with drugs, who didn't show a minute of kindness, and would have put a cattle bolt to her head had the regulations not improved and the kindness of volunteers and rescue centres. Due to Morag being so timid and scared, the Greyhound Rescue Fife advised Marie that a male dog companion would bring Morag out of herself. And so Marie went back up to Kinross and fell in love again with her second sight hound, Hector, a big blue boy, only 26 months old. He'd been bought from his breeder in Ireland for £12,000. The trainer in Tranent had raced him 3 times at Newcastle. The blue boy stopped to play at the last bend in each race, so he was disqualified. Luckily, he never had to put up with the life of a slave to the gambling industry for long. Sandside Chief never made money for anyone, but he became a much-loved pet for part of that family. Every morning, Marie wakes up to the pleasure of these wonderful greyhounds trotting towards her for hugs and food. And I adore them and all greyhounds, and that's her words. The racing greyhound is a special commodity. She said, I would like to see the breed die out. I would like to see greyhound racing banned. Show greyhounds are looked after. Coursing greyhounds have a healthier lifestyle, but the racing greyhound is born into servitude, and from the age of 6 weeks is trained for only one thing, to make money. I think we've all acknowledged a lot of problems in the industry, there is no doubt about that, but if a ban isn't forthcoming, I would say the pursuit of a better life for these greyhounds is an absolute priority. Thank you.
Pleasure to speak under your chairmanship this afternoon. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate for the opposition and to respond. And I'd like to begin by thanking my honourable friend from Neath for opening the debate and for raising a range of thought-provoking and important points that we must all take on board now and in the weeks and months ahead. I have to say, Sir Roger, it was a useful, constructive debate, almost harmonious. I get a little bit anxious when these things happen, but this debating chamber has many debates in that respect, so it's good that we're working together constructively. And I'd also like to acknowledge the colleagues that have spoken in this debate today, members for Romford, Tewkesbury, Wansbeck and Tiverton and Honiton. And also those who signed the petition of the top 10 constituencies, and that they start from the Isle of Wight, Central Devon, Brighton Kemp Town, Brighton Pavilion, Torridge and West Devon, Tiverton and Honiton, Hastings and Rye, Camborne and Redruth, the seat of the Secretary of State himself, Edinburgh North and Leith, the seat of the SNP spokesperson, and finally Somerton and Frome. Because it is important that we acknowledge when our constituents get involved and they get active, and they have very clearly done so on this important issue. Sir Roger, we are here this afternoon because this petition received over 104,000 signatures from local people across the UK. Now, I don't want to detain the House longer than is necessary, but I do want to say a few things that I hope will reassure those who signed the petition that these benches on this side are listening, but more importantly, that we know that this side of the House understands animal welfare. We believe in honouring animal welfare, and we will always push for the strongest possible animal welfare policies. Like many on this side of the House, I am concerned that the lack of transparency around what happens to greyhounds after they are no longer fit for racing means nobody knows the real situation. So I hope the Minister will address this specific point in the wind-up. And it is important we hear about the transparency point, because I believe, and my party believes, we must ensure all retired greyhounds are properly cared for. What we need is proper guidance on best practice on responsible ownership, statutory minimum standards for racing and welfare, better mechanisms to trace ownership, and a centralised database to record what happens after greyhounds are no longer fit to race. And I wonder if the Minister does agree, and if she does, will she speak to each of these real and tangible objectives? As colleagues will know and has already been outlined by the Chair of the EFRA Select Committee, the welfare of racing greyhounds in England is covered by the Animal Welfare Act 2006 and the Welfare of Racing Greyhounds Regulation 2010. These regulations were reviewed in 2016 and the government states they were found to be broadly effective. We know that the ministers believe that a ban remains unnecessary and this side agrees with them. I would be grateful, though, if the Minister could outline the most recent engagement with the Greyhound Board of Great Britain and what action is being taken to improve welfare concerns, not just outlined in this debate today, but by the more than 100,000 people who signed the petition. Ministers had indicated from January 2021 that all trainers' residential kennels will be subject to auditing and veterinary inspections. So could we have a progress check on this, please? Last week I attended and spoke for the opposition at the Humane Society International Parliamentary Reception. And in my speech I thanked the Secretary of State, who was present, for reading Labour's animal welfare proposals in such detail that he ended up pinching many of those proposals for his own animal welfare action plan. And this is important because in his action plan, a commitment was given to considering further protection for racing greyhounds, including further steps to improve standards at trainers' kennels. So I would be grateful if the Minister could, in some detail, outline what those further protections look like. I would be very happy to receive a written report, but it would be great if we could have the information this afternoon, and I'm sure those sitting in the gallery seats would be interested too. Can the Minister also touch on what steps are being taken to reduce the number of dogs being put to sleep on humane grounds following injuries at the track? And this is a matter of considerable interest to many, and some clarity here would be appreciated. I led for the opposition on the Kept Animals Bill, and the member for Romford was a member of that committee as well, the Animal Sentience Bill, and a range of other related pieces of legislation like the Animal Penalties Bill, in my role as Shadow Minister for Animal Welfare. And I am determined to keep pushing the government for the strongest possible action on animal welfare and the strongest possible resolve in the fight to act and not just make empty promises. That's why I supported measures contained within the Animal Welfare Sentencing Act, which increased maximum sentences for the most severe acts of animal cruelty from 6 months to 5 years. And in a moment of cross-party agreement, I am pleased this legislation became law on the 29th of April 2021, after much hard work from both the government members and former colleagues like Anna Turley, the former member for Redcar. Their work now means that the maximum penalty is now 5 years imprisonment, and that's a good step for animal welfare and shows that change can happen if people want it to. Ministers can and should focus on the strongest possible support for greyhounds, notably those who've retired or been injured, and should make sure this sport, a part of so many working class communities across the UK, gets the safeguards and protections it needs. I outline the following as a starter for 10. Proper guidance on best practice on responsible ownership. Statutory minimum standards for racing and welfare. Better mechanisms to trace ownership. And, as already mentioned, a centralised database to record what happens after greyhounds are no longer fit to race. That's a plan ready to go, so I would urge the Minister to get back to her department after the debate and get on with it. Thank you.
Minister Rebecca Pow.
Thank you, Sir Roger, and a pleasure to have you in the chair, as I know you are particularly interested in animal welfare, and it has been a genuinely actually really fascinating, quite moving debate, I think we'll all agree. And I wanted to welcome everyone who is here listening as well, including our canine friend, who I hope is comfortable back there. But clearly there is a great deal of love in the room here, isn't there, for wonderful greyhounds, and they are absolutely lovely creatures. I don't think anyone would deny that. And I very much want to thank the Honourable Member from Neath for opening this debate and putting the case well, obviously, for those 104,000 people who have signed the petition. And I do want to say from the very outset that this government takes the issue of greyhound welfare extremely seriously. And I think that's been very clear as well from everything everybody has said. and particularly the EFRA Select Committee, who I do want to thank again at the beginning for their ongoing work on greyhounds. I was actually on that EFRA Select Committee when they did the inquiry back in 2006, and I wasn't on the subcommittee, but very much was involved in all the talks and discussions and that scrutiny that took place back then. And I would urge them to keep going with their scrutiny, very much so. And I wanted to say very much at the beginning that I do believe a huge amount of progress has been made to improve greyhound welfare, and so this government does believe that an actual ban is unnecessary. That's not to say improvements in welfare are always welcome, and we should always be working towards that, as many people who've spoken today have said. So just to go back over a bit of the history, it was in 2016 that DEFRA and the EFRA Select Committee undertook that very thorough review that we've heard about from the Honourable Member from Tiverton and Honiton, of the 2010 Welfare of Racing Greyhounds regulations. And those regulations set welfare standards for all tracks in England, while allowing the industry regulator, the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, known as GBGB, to enforce those standards at GBGB tracks. Independent tracks require a local authority licence. Just out of interest, there is only one independent track in England, and that is Askham, which is in Doncaster. And the 2016 review looked at the performance of GBGB as an enforcer of the 2010 regulations, and it found it effective. EFRA reported that they had not seen evidence of critical failings that warranted the creation of an independent regulator at this point. However, while the 2010 regulations were found to have improved track welfare, both EFRA and DEFRA, indeed, stated that GBGB should be doing more. So EFRA recommended, as we've heard, that it was vital that the industry demonstrates capacity to initiate welfare reform without legislative compulsion if it wanted to stay as a self-regulator. And the government then challenged GBGB to do more for greyhounds at trainers' kennels and also to be more transparent. And since 2018, GBGB have published annually detailed figures on the number of GBGB greyhounds injured and euthanased. They have also published the number of greyhounds rehomed or kept by trainers. Those stats, because this was raised, of course I'll give way. Yes.
I thank you very much for summing up. I think the issue too for GBGB is to make sure, I think, that greyhounds that can be given enough veterinary expertise and be corrected. Sorry, I lost my words, but basically it mustn't be that the dog is put down because it's uneconomic to be able to actually have that dog actually the veterinary care and operations to make sure that that dog can live and have a good life. So I think it's key to make sure it's not an economic decision, it's an animal welfare decision on whether that dog is euthanized. Minister.
I thank him for that. And I'll go on to talk a bit more about the new the National Welfare Strategy that's being worked on, which is called, very appropriately, A Good Life for Every Greyhound. And I think very much the point he raises will be dealt with within that strategy, and rightly so. I was just going to say, because it was mentioned by the Honourable Member from Neath, that the stats were queried about the injuries and so forth, but the stats are independently verified in a manner approved by DEFRA. So I just wanted to make that clear. And also, just on data and stats, the Shadow Minister asked for a database, a GBGB database. There actually already is a central database that GBGB run. Now, they've also developed, with welfare groups, including the RSPCA, the Kennel Club, Battersea and the Dogs Trust, independent standards and a code of practice for trainers' kennels. And GBGB trainers' kennels are now independently inspected against these standards. And before the end of this year, GBGB should be accredited as an enforcer for them. And now, responding to EFRA in 2018, GBGB introduced their Greyhound Commitment, which set out further welfare reforms, and this included their injury recovery and retirement schemes. And shortly, GBGB, as I said, will produce and launch its National Welfare Strategy. And the strategy will look across a whole range of issues, but really genuinely focused on welfare throughout the dog's life, not just during their racing career. So I do think this will address the point that was just raised by the Honourable Member from Tiverton and Honiton. Now, I must say, Sir Roger, that I was concerned to hear those comments about the Valley track, which I believe is in Caerphilly. And I just did want to point out that I understand there's only one greyhound track in Wales, and it is currently that one, I believe, and it's independent. And, of course, greyhound regulations are devolved. And unlike in England, there is no specific greyhound regulation in Wales, nor indeed in Scotland, I believe. And I listened carefully to what the SNP member said. But I believe that Welsh ministers have recently announced that greyhound racing and its licensing will be considered as part of their animal welfare plan for Wales. And independent tracks in England have been required to be licensed since 2010, but our regulations, to clarify, the 2010 regulations apply to all tracks in England, including independent ones. Yes, of course I will.
Thank the Minister for giving way. And she's put her finger on the problem, really, that Valley's track is in Ystrad Mynach, near Caerphilly, and it's an independent track, soon to be a GBGB track. And that the petition that was heard in the Senedd is going to be debated and form part of the plan. So she's quite correct, but I'd be interested to know what she thinks of the transformation from independent to GBGB track.
Thank you. Well, I thank her for her comments, but of course it is in Wales, I believe, this track. And it is at the moment it's still devolved. So if she wants some more detail on the transition to the GBG track, I'm happy to get back to her in writing.
Make myself clear. In a specific case, say in England, where an independent track becomes a GBGB track, what circumstances would the Minister consider important in that situation?
I thank you for that. We only have one independent track in England, which I've named just now. And as far as I know, it doesn't have any desire to transfer, but if it did, it would have to just adhere to all the correct standards and exactly as all the other tracks do. And I'm sure if he wants further detail on that, we can get back to her with that. I just wanted to touch on the point about bookmakers, which has been raised. They've also been encouraged by the government to pay their fair share to fund GBGB welfare. And consistently, though, around 95% of all licensed betting offices, which includes online, are now contributing to the voluntary greyhound levy. I do take the point from the honourable friend from Tiverton and Honiton that the betting industry needs to be responsible in terms of its contribution in funding welfare, injuries, rehoming and so forth. Remember, of course, betting is a DCMS-led policy, so I would urge him, as well as raising this with me, to raise it with DCMS too.
There is no doubt that some of the betting industry is actually paying its dues. Others aren't. And I think that is the key. Everybody should be paying. And that's why I would urge the Minister, not only herself, but she can also contact DCMS ministers, not just me, and make sure that we actually fight this hard, because I'm determined that all the betting industry should pay their dues.
Okay, I thank him for that, and I completely take his point. I really do. And the government believes that greyhound racing currently has a very proactive, pro-welfare body in charge that wishes to work to improve animal welfare. And I just wanted to touch, I think there was such a lot of agreement in this room, particularly from the Honourable Member from Romford. I've got to thank him for all his greyhound work that he does with the Greyhound Trust, for the all-party group. You couldn't have a greater advocate, actually, I think, for greyhounds. And I just urge him to keep up his scrutiny of the industry. And he painted such a great picture of his track in Essex. And, you know, was genuinely, I think, very supportive of the improvements made. But I think we all agree if there are more welfare improvements to make, we must make them. The member from Tewkesbury also raised this in his comments. And I've got to say, I mean, what a lot we learn, Sir Roger, at people in these debates. the honourable member from Wansbeck. I have learnt so much about his life with greyhounds, and I've got to say it was a bit of a revelation actually, and I think he really brightened up the afternoon with all of his insights and his experience and his knowledge, for which I've got to thank him, because he clearly had so much knowledge and experience, and I would urge him to keep also up his scrutiny as well in terms of working with the others here on the welfare of these absolutely lovely creatures. I think they quite like to sit on a sofa actually, as well as do all that running, don't they? I've seen them being very lazy. So I think I'm going to conclude there, Sir Roger. I hope that I hear what's been said in the petition. I thank all those who signed the petition, but I hope we have made it very clear that this government takes animal welfare as a whole incredibly seriously, but particularly this whole issue of greyhounds and greyhound racing, and that improvements are yet to be made. They will still be made, and indeed, I hope I've made that very clear, but this government doesn't feel that a ban on greyhound racing is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Rees, to wind up the debate, please.
I'd like to thank all honourable members for their contributions today. Animal welfare is always very emotive, but I think it's been a very respectful debate. Can I ask the Minister again if she would meet the petitioner and Vanessa, perhaps at Hope Rescue? So maybe the Minister would just answer that in the few seconds remaining.
Minister?
Thank you for putting me on the spot. Well, the point is actually, we're always pleased to hear in DEFRA if people have got views about animal welfare. Of course, we're very happy to hear from them, and if they want to communicate with us. Actually, the Minister who deals with this is actually not me, Sir Roger. So I will pass on that message, and if they would like to meet with you, she's actually got COVID, Sir Roger, I'm sure they'll be in touch. But thank you so much for your comments.
Christina Rees.
Thank you, Minister. And I'd like to thank everyone again for contributing to this debate. And I'd like to thank you, Sir Roger, for excellent chairship as usual.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 554073 relating to greyhound racing. If any of that opinion say aye. Contrary no, the ayes have it. Order. Would those leaving please do so reasonably quietly? The next debate is due to start in 2 minutes. Thank you.